The silence of the house was suffocating. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound accompanying her rapid heartbeat. She scrolled through Victor's call logs on the shared family plan, noting the frequent late-night calls to a number she didn't recognize. Her husband's excuses had grown flimsier by the day, and her intuition screamed that something was wrong. Victor had once been the center of her world, a charming, ambitious doctor who promised her a life of stability and luxury. But over the past year, the warmth in his eyes had been replaced by an unsettling coldness. Distant dinners, unexplained absences, and secretive behavior had turned their home into a battleground of unspoken questions. Tonight, however, was different. Victor had told her he was working late, but a strange intuition kept Elena from accepting his excuse. She had tracked his location through the Find My Phone app earlier, noticing his phone was not at the clinic but in their house. Her chest tightened as she realized the implications. Slipping out of her bedroom, Elena moved through the darkened hallway toward Victor's office. The muffled sound of his voice came from inside. She hesitated, her trembling hand hovering near the door. Taking a deep breath, she slowly opened it a crack. Victor was on the phone, pacing as he spoke in hushed tones. His words were just audible enough to make her blood run cold. "I told you to keep this off the radar," he hissed. "The clinic needs clean accounts for the next quarter. No mistakes." Elena's stomach churned. What could he be talking about? Money laundering? Illegal deals? She backed away carefully, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. Her breath came in short gasps as she fled back to their bedroom. But she couldn't stop. Her suspicions had become unbearable. When Victor stepped out of the house for another late-night meeting, Elena made her move. She crawled under their bed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Hours passed as she waited, her muscles stiff and her mind racing. Just when she thought she had made a mistake, the sound of Victor returning jolted her alert. The bedroom door creaked open and she saw his shoes first, polished and precise, stepping into the room. Another pair of heels followed, a woman's. Elena's heart stopped. She recognized those shoes immediately. They belonged to Sophia, her best friend. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Victor chuckled, his tone light and intimate. "You're late." Sophia's voice was a dagger. "Traffic. But I made it." The pair moved to the bed, and Elena fought the overwhelming urge to cry out. Her fingers gripped the carpet beneath her as their conversation continued above her. It wasn't just an affair, it was something darker. They spoke in cryptic fragments about accounts, clients, and a mysterious figure named Morales. As the minutes dragged on, Elena's world crumbled. She had crawled under the bed looking for answers to one betrayal, but what she found was a labyrinth of secrets far worse than she had imagined. When the pair finally left the room, Elena remained frozen beneath the bed, her breath shallow and her heart pounding. Her marriage, her best friend, her entire life, they were all lies. She emerged from her hiding place hours later, shaken but resolute. Elena didn't know how, but she would uncover the full truth. And when she did, she would make Victor pay. Elena's fingers traced the edge of a wedding photo on her bedside table. In the image, Victor stood beside her, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his broad smile promising a lifetime of happiness. She remembered how she had clung to that promise in the early days of their marriage, believing that their union was built on love and trust. But now, the photo felt like a cruel mockery of her shattered reality. Her mind drifted to the beginning, how they met at a charity gala. Victor had been magnetic, with his polished manners and sharp wit. He was everything she had dreamed of in a partner, successful, handsome, and driven. He swept her off her feet with grand gestures, from surprise trips to Paris to a proposal in front of a crowd at a lavish fundraiser. At the time it felt like a fairy tale. But fairy tales often hid dark truths. The first crack appeared 6 months into their marriage. Victor had become secretive about his work, dodging her questions with charm that felt rehearsed. When she asked about the long hours at the clinic, he dismissed her concerns with a casual, "It's just part of the job, Elena. You know how demanding medicine can be." She tried to believe him. After all, the lifestyle they shared, the sprawling house, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, was built on his success. Yet there were moments she couldn't ignore. The hushed phone calls, the last-minute trips, the way he avoided her gaze when she pressed too hard. Her parents had warned her before the wedding. "He's too perfect," her father had said, his brow furrowed with concern. "People like him always have something to hide." At the time, Elena had brushed it off as overprotectiveness. Now she wished she had listened. Elena's thoughts shifted to Sophia. They had been inseparable since college, sharing everything from late-night study sessions to heartbreaks over failed relationships. Sofia had been there on Elena's wedding day, beaming with pride as she stood beside her as the maid of honor. To think that the same person had been in her bedroom, conspiring with Victor, it was a betrayal too painful to fully grasp. The memories flooded back, how Sofia always seemed to know a little too much about Victor's business, how she would deflect Elena's suspicions with reassuring smiles. "He's just stressed," Sofia had said more than once. Running a clinic is no small feat. Elena felt a surge of anger. How had she been so blind? The signs were there all along, but she had chosen to ignore them, clinging to the illusion of a perfect marriage. Determined to uncover the truth, Elena opened her laptop and began digging. She searched Victor's name alongside terms like fraud, lawsuit, and investigation. At first, nothing alarming came up, just accolades for his contributions to medicine and articles praising his clinic's success. But as she delved deeper, she stumbled upon a small news article buried in the archives of a local newspaper. The headline read, "Local Doctor's Clinic Under Scrutiny for Financial Irregularities." Her heart raced as she clicked on the link. The article was short, mentioning a preliminary investigation into discrepancies in the clinic's accounts. Victor had dismissed the claims as a clerical error, and the case had been closed shortly after. But something about it didn't sit right with Elena. Why hadn't he mentioned this to her? What else was he hiding? The more she read, the more questions surfaced. She found herself questioning every aspect of her life with Victor. Had their love ever been real? Or had she been another asset in his carefully curated image? Elena closed her laptop, her hands trembling. The truth was a storm gathering on the horizon, and she could feel its weight pressing down on her. She had spent years building her life around Victor, but now she realized it was time to dismantle the lies and face the reality she had long ignored. For the first time in years, Elena felt a spark of defiance. She wouldn't let Victor and Sofia's betrayal break her. Instead, she would uncover their secrets, no matter how painful or dangerous it might be. As the night stretched on, Elena stared at her wedding photo one last time before placing it face down on the table. The fairy tale was over. Now it was time to uncover the truth. Elena waited until Victor left for his clinic the next morning. She watched him through the window as he climbed into his sleek black car, his usual air of confidence unwavering. The thought of his betrayal churned in her stomach, but she kept her expression calm, even as her fingers clenched into fists. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, Elena made her move. She headed to Victor's office, his sanctuary where no one but him was allowed to tread. The room was immaculate, its shelves lined with medical journals and awards. But Elena knew this pristine facade was just that, a facade. Her heart raced as she began opening drawers, rifling through files. At first, all she found were patient records and business contracts, nothing out of the ordinary. But then she stumbled upon a locked drawer. Her breath caught. The small key Victor kept on his desk fit perfectly. Inside were documents far more telling. Account statements from an offshore bank, invoices for medical equipment that didn't match the clinic's inventory, and a ledger filled with coded entries. She didn't understand all the details, but one thing was clear: these weren't the records of an honest medical practice. She pulled out her phone and snapped photos of everything. If Victor was involved in something illegal, she needed proof. But as she worked, a new fear gripped her. If Victor found out what she was doing, what would he do to stop her? Her hands shook as she reached the bottom of the drawer, where she found a sealed envelope marked M. Opening it, she discovered photos and documents that sent a chill down her spine. The images depicted men in dark suits exchanging briefcases. There were notes detailing shipments, along with Victor's name scrawled in the margins. The pieces began to fall into place. This wasn't just about financial fraud. Victor's clinic was a front for something much bigger. "Elena?" a voice called from the hallway. Her heart stopped. For a moment she thought Victor had returned. But it was the housekeeper, Maria, standing in the doorway with a puzzled expression. "Oh, I didn't mean to startle you," Maria said, clutching a stack of linens. "I just came to tidy up." Elena quickly slid the papers back into the drawer. "No need, Maria. I'm just organizing a few things for Victor." The housekeeper nodded and left without another word. Elena let out a shaky breath. Her cover was still intact, but the pressure of keeping this secret was already weighing on her. She returned to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she spread out the photos and documents she had taken. Among the names listed in the notes was one she recognized immediately: Gabriel Morales. A powerful name in whispers around the city, a man rumored to run one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the region. Victor was working with a cartel. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The man she had loved and trusted wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal. And the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became. But there was one more discovery to make. Hidden among the documents was a familiar signature, Sophia's. It was scrawled at the bottom of several financial agreements, tying her directly to the shady dealings of Victor's clinic. Elena stared at the papers, her hands trembling. Sophia wasn't just complicit, she was deeply entrenched in Victor's world. The betrayal stung like an open wound. Sophia, who had held her hand during her wedding vows, who had been her confidant and sister in all but blood, was part of the darkness threatening to engulf Elena's life. For a moment, Elena felt paralyzed by the enormity of what she had uncovered. She was alone, standing at the edge of a chasm with no clear way forward. But then a new resolve took hold. She couldn't afford to fall apart. If Victor and Sophia thought they could manipulate and deceive her, they were wrong. Elena packed the documents and photos into a folder, hiding it in the back of her closet. She couldn't confront Victor yet, not without understanding the full scope of his crimes. But one thing was certain. She wouldn't let him continue his charade unchallenged. That evening, when Victor returned home, Elena greeted him with the same calm smile she had perfected over the years. He kissed her cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. As they sat down to dinner, Victor talked about his day at the clinic, his tone casual, even cheerful. Elena nodded along, pretending to listen while her mind raced with plans. Victor may have been the master of deception, but now she had the upper hand. For the first time, she saw her husband for who he truly was. Not a man to be loved, but an enemy to be defeated. Elena sat at the cafe table, her hands wrapped around a mug of steaming tea. Across from her, Sophia's warm smile and sparkling eyes were a painful reminder of the friendship that now felt like a lie. Elena had invited Sophia for a casual chat, masking her true intentions beneath a veil of normalcy. "How have you been?" Sophia asked, her tone light as she sipped her coffee. "You look a little tired." Elena forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind. Victor's been working late again and, well, you know how it is." Sophia nodded sympathetically, her expression genuine. Or was it? Elena couldn't be sure anymore. Every word Sophia said felt laced with deception. But Elena kept her cool. She couldn't afford to let Sophia see the cracks in her facade. Not yet. "I've been meaning to ask you," Elena said, keeping her tone casual. "You've been helping Victor with the clinic's finances, right?" Sophia hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Here and there. You know how he is, always needing someone to keep him organized. And how is that going?" Elena pressed, her heart pounding. "It must be a lot of work." Sophia shrugged, her smile faltering slightly. "It's nothing I can't handle." "Why do you ask?" Elena took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I found some documents in Victor's office the other day. They seemed unusual." Sophia's eyes flickered with something. Nervousness? Anger? It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual composed demeanor. "What kind of documents?" "Bank statements, invoices. They didn't seem related to the clinic's normal operations." Elena's voice was steady, but her pulse raced. "I thought you might know something about them." Sophia laughed, a sound that felt rehearsed. "Oh, Elena, you know how clinics are. There are always odd expenses and accounts. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about." Elena studied her friend carefully. Sophia's response was smooth, but there was an edge to her laughter, a hint of unease she couldn't quite hide. For the first time, Elena saw through the mask Sophia had worn for years. "I suppose you're right," Elena said, leaning back in her chair. "It's probably just my overactive imagination." Sophia reached across the table, placing a hand on Elena's. "You've been through so much, Elena. Don't let these little things stress you out. Victor adores you, and everything he does is for your future together." Elena felt a pang of bitterness. The future Sophia spoke of was built on lies, and the hand resting on hers belonged to someone who had betrayed her in the most intimate way. But she kept her composure, offering a grateful smile. "Thank you, Sophia. I don't know what I'd do without you." As they parted ways, Elena felt a mix of anger and determination. Sophia had confirmed what she already suspected. Her best friend was deeply involved in Victor's schemes. But the question remained, how far did that involvement go? That evening, Elena sat alone in her bedroom, staring at the folder of evidence she had gathered. Her conversation with Sophia replayed in her mind, each word and gesture taking on new significance. Sophia wasn't just complicit, she was protecting Victor, covering for him with the same charm and warmth she had used to gain Elena's trust. Elena's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Sophia. "Don't worry about those documents. If you ever need help sorting through anything, just let me know. I'm always here for you. Red heart." The hypocrisy of the message made Elena's blood boil. Sophia's betrayal was complete, and any lingering doubts about her loyalty were gone. Elena's trust had been shattered, but she wouldn't let it break her resolve. Instead, she would use Sophia's closeness to her advantage. Elena replied with a simple, "Thank you, Sophia. I'll let you know," and then turned her focus back to her next move. She needed more evidence, something irrefutable that could bring Victor and Sophia's entire operation crashing down. As the night deepened, Elena felt the weight of her isolation. The people she had once trusted most were now her adversaries. But she refused to let despair take hold. If Victor and Sophia thought she was a pawn in their game, they were wrong. Elena was playing her own game now, and she was determined to win. Elena stared at the address scrawled on the crumpled paper in her hand. She had found it tucked away among Victor's documents, marked only as M property. Her stomach churned as she realized where it might lead her, but fear no longer deterred her. It only fueled her determination. The location was on the outskirts of the city, far from the manicured suburbs she called home. As she drove past dilapidated warehouses and abandoned lots, her anxiety mounted. Finally, she reached the address, a nondescript building with boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. Elena parked her car a block away and approached cautiously, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew this place held answers. Pulling her jacket tightly around her, she slipped through a side entrance, careful to avoid drawing attention. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of mildew. The faint hum of machinery echoed through the halls, guiding her toward the back of the building. As she stepped into a large storage room, her breath caught. Rows of crates and medical supplies were stacked against the walls, but they weren't the kind you'd find in a legitimate clinic. One crate stood open, revealing surgical equipment and vials with foreign labels. Another contained neatly packed bundles of cash wrapped in plastic. The scene confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just a front for financial fraud, it was a hub for criminal operations. Elena pulled out her phone and began snapping photos, her hands shaking. She didn't notice the sound of footsteps until it was too late. "Who the hell are you?" The voice was sharp and menacing. Elena spun around to find a man in his 40s, his muscular frame and hardened expression radiating authority. He carried a pistol holstered at his side, and his eyes narrowed as he approached her. I'm lost," Elena stammered, taking a step back. She clutched her phone tightly, hoping he hadn't seen her taking pictures. "Lost?" he echoed, his tone dripping with suspicion. "This isn't the kind of place people wander into." Elena's mind raced for an explanation. "My car broke down nearby, and I thought someone might be here to help," she lied, forcing a nervous smile. The man didn't look convinced. His gaze flicked to her phone. "Let me see that." Before she could react, he grabbed the phone from her hand, scrolling through the photos she had just taken. His jaw tightened and Elena's blood ran cold. "You're not lost," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're a spy." Elena opened her mouth to protest, but before she could speak, another voice cut through the tension. "Let her go." The man froze, stepping aside as a tall figure emerged from the shadows. The newcomer was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his slicked-back hair and sharp features exuding authority. Elena recognized him immediately from the documents she had found. Gabriel Morales. "What are you doing here?" Morales asked, his tone calm but commanding. Elena swallowed hard, trying to summon the courage to respond. "I'm looking for answers." Morales raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Answers to what?" "To what my husband Victor is doing," she said, her voice trembling. "I know he's working with you. I know this place is connected to his clinic." Morales studied her for a long moment, then signaled to his subordinate to hand her phone back. The man hesitated but complied, tossing the device into her hands. "You're brave," Morales said, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Or very foolish." Elena clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath her fear. "I just want the truth." Morales chuckled, the sound cold and humorless. "The truth, Mrs. Torres, is dangerous. Your husband is part of something far bigger than you can imagine. If I were you, I'd stop asking questions before you end up with answers you don't want." His words sent a chill down her spine, but Elena refused to back down. "Victor betrayed me. I deserve to know everything." Morales' smile faded. "Then you're in over your head. Go home, Mrs. Torres. Forget what you saw here. He turned to leave, but Elena wasn't finished. You can't scare me into silence, she called after him. I'm going to expose all of this. Morales stopped, glancing over his shoulder. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of respect. Be careful who you threaten, he said softly. You might not like the consequences. As he disappeared into the shadows, Elena felt her resolve harden. She had crossed a line, but there was no turning back now. Victor, Morales, and everyone involved in their operation had underestimated her. They saw her as a housewife, a pawn in their game. But Elena was about to prove them wrong. Leaving the warehouse, Elena clutched her phone like a lifeline. She had the evidence she needed to take the next step, but she knew Morales's warning wasn't an idle threat. The cartel wouldn't let her meddle in their affairs without a fight. As she drove away, her mind raced with possibilities. She couldn't trust the police, not with something this big. She needed allies, but finding someone who could help without betraying her was a gamble. One thing was certain: the stakes had never been higher. The web of lies surrounding Victor was darker and more dangerous than she had imagined, but Elena was prepared to risk everything to bring it down. Elena sat in her car outside her house, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. Her encounter with Gabriel Morales replayed in her mind, each word and gesture a reminder of the danger she was now in. The cartel was real, their reach vast, and Victor was deeply entangled in their web. She felt the weight of her decision to press on, knowing it could cost her everything. As she entered the house, the familiar creak of the floorboards greeted her. The warmth of home, once a source of comfort, now felt oppressive. She made her way to the bedroom, intending to secure the evidence she had gathered, but her heart dropped when she opened the closet. The folder was gone. Panic surged through her. She searched frantically, pulling clothes and boxes from the shelves, but it was nowhere to be found. Someone had been here. Her mind immediately went to Victor. Had he suspected her? Had he found the folder and realized she was digging into his secrets? Elena? His voice startled her. She turned to see Victor standing in the doorway, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. He leaned against the frame, his hands in his pockets, exuding the casual confidence that once charmed her but now felt menacing. You're home early, he said, his tone light but probing. Elena forced a smile, her mind racing. I wasn't feeling well. Thought I'd rest. Victor stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the mess she had created. What's all this? Oh, just reorganizing, she said quickly, gesturing to the pile of clothes on the floor. You know how I get when I'm stressed. Victor chuckled, but the sound didn't reach his eyes. You've been stressed a lot lately. Anything I should know about? Elena's stomach twisted. Was this an innocent question, or did he already suspect her? She shook her head. Just the usual. You working late, me worrying too much. Victor approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The touch felt like a warning. You don't need to worry about anything, Elena. I've got everything under control. She nodded, playing the role of the dutiful wife, but inside she was screaming. If Victor had the folder, he would know how much she had uncovered. And if he didn't, then someone else had taken it, a prospect that terrified her even more. That night, as Victor slept beside her, Elena lay awake, her mind racing. She had to act quickly. The missing folder was a setback, but it wouldn't stop her. She still had the photos on her phone, and she had seen enough at the warehouse to know where to look next. The next day, while Victor was at the clinic, Elena reached out to a contact she hadn't spoken to in years. Daniel Ruiz, a former journalist turned private investigator. Daniel had helped expose a corruption scandal years ago, and Elena hoped he could help her now. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Daniel was older than she remembered, his once sharp features softened by time, but his eyes still held the same keen intelligence. Elena Torres, he said, shaking her hand. This is a surprise. What can I do for you? Elena hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. I need help uncovering the truth about my husband. He's involved in something dangerous, and I think it might be tied to a cartel. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I have photos, documents, she said, pulling out her phone to show him the images. And I've seen things, shipments, money exchanges. It's bigger than I thought. Daniel studied the photos, his expression darkening. You're right. This isn't small time. If your husband is working with Gabriel Morales, you're in serious danger. Elena leaned forward. That's why I need your help. I can't go to the police, they could be compromised. I need someone I can trust. Daniel nodded slowly. All right. But if we're going to do this, we need to be smart. Morales isn't the kind of man who leaves loose ends. Elena felt a flicker of hope. With Daniel's help, she might finally have a chance to expose Victor and bring down his operation. But as they discussed their plan, her phone buzzed with a message. "Unknown number, stop digging or you'll regret it." Her blood ran cold. The cartel was watching her. She showed the message to Daniel, who frowned. "They're trying to scare you. Don't let them. But we'll need to be extra careful from here on out." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. The threats only confirmed what she already knew. She was close to the truth and Victor's world was beginning to unravel. But the closer she got, the more dangerous the game became. As she drove home that evening, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. A dark SUV had appeared in her rearview mirror, staying several car lengths behind her. She took a detour, weaving through side streets, but the vehicle remained. By the time she reached her driveway, her nerves were frayed. She stepped out of the car, glancing over her shoulder, but the SUV was gone. Still, the unease lingered. The cartel's reach was vast, and she was no longer invisible to them. Inside the house, Victor was waiting for her. He looked up from his laptop as she entered, his expression unreadable. "You're late," he said. "Traffic," Elena replied, forcing a smile. Victor nodded, but his gaze lingered on her as if he could see through her lies. "Be careful out there. You never know who might be watching." His words sent a chill down her spine. Victor knew more than he was letting on, and the walls were closing in. But Elena refused to back down. The truth was within reach and she would risk everything to bring it to light. Elena sat in her kitchen, the early morning light casting long shadows across the counter. Her coffee sat untouched, growing colder by the minute as she stared at her phone. The threatening message still lingered in her mind, a grim reminder of how dangerous her situation had become. Despite the risks, she was determined to move forward. Daniel had been thorough in his initial findings. He confirmed that Victor's clinic was not only laundering money but was also involved in performing illegal surgeries, operations on people tied to the cartel, including fugitives and those seeking to erase their identities. The implications were horrifying, but what struck Elena the most was the sheer scale of the operation. Victor wasn't just a participant, he was a central figure. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was Daniel. "I found someone who might help," he said without preamble. "Her name is Rosa Martinez. She used to work at Victor's clinic and was fired under suspicious circumstances. She might know more." Elena felt a surge of hope. "Where can I find her?" "She's staying with her sister in the old district. I'll send you the address. Be careful. If anyone is watching, they'll notice if you dig too deep." Elena thanked him and hung up. She didn't waste any time, quickly grabbing her things and heading out. The drive to the old district was tense, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few minutes. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her, but each time she turned down a new street, there was no sign of pursuit. When she reached the address, a modest apartment building with peeling paint and a rusty gate, she hesitated for a moment. Then, taking a deep breath, she climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. Rosa answered, her wary eyes scanning Elena as if assessing her intentions. She was a petite woman with dark circles under her eyes and an air of quiet resilience. After a moment, she stepped aside, letting Elena in. "What do you want?" Rosa asked, crossing her arms. "I need your help," Elena said, her voice steady. "I know about Victor's clinic. I know what he's been doing. Daniel Ruiz said you might have information." Rosa's expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." Elena leaned forward, her desperation spilling out. "Please. I'm not here to hurt you. Victor is my husband, and I've uncovered enough to know he's involved in something terrible. I need to stop him, but I can't do it alone." Rosa studied her for a long moment, her guarded demeanor softening slightly. "You're brave coming here. If Victor finds out, he won't let you walk away." Elena swallowed hard. "I don't care. I just need the truth." Rosa sighed, sitting down at the small kitchen table. "All right. But if I tell you what I know, you have to promise to protect yourself. The people Victor works for, they don't leave loose ends." "I promise," Elena said, her voice trembling but resolute. Rosa began to talk, her words painting a damning picture of Victor's clinic. She described how Victor had recruited staff willing to turn a blind eye to illegal activities, performing surgeries that left no traceable records. Rosa had tried to report the operations to local authorities but had been silenced and fired when her concerns became too vocal. "They threatened my family," Rosa said, her voice breaking. "I had no choice but to disappear." Elena's heart ached at Rosa's story, but it also gave her a sense of purpose. She wasn't alone in fighting Victor's corruption. Together they could expose the truth. Do you have any proof? Elena asked. Rosa hesitated, then nodded. I kept some files before I left. They're encrypted, but they have details of every illegal procedure Victor approved. Elena felt a surge of hope. Can you give them to me? They're on an old drive, Rosa said. I'll need time to retrieve it. Meet me tomorrow at the park on 5th Street. Elena agreed, thanking Rosa for her bravery. As she left the apartment, she felt a flicker of optimism. With Rosa's help, she might finally have the evidence she needed to bring Victor down. The following day, Elena arrived at the park early, her nerves on edge. She kept scanning the area, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Rosa arrived shortly after, clutching a small USB drive in her hand. This has everything, Rosa said, handing it over. Be careful with it. Elena nodded, slipping the drive into her purse. Thank you. I'll make sure it's used to stop him. But as the women parted ways, a black SUV pulled up at the edge of the park. Elena's blood ran cold as two men stepped out, their eyes locked on her. She didn't wait to find out who they were. She turned and ran, her heart pounding as she darted through the crowded park. The men pursued her, their heavy footsteps closing in. Elena's breath came in short gasps as she weaved between trees and benches, clutching her purse tightly. She spotted a side street and sprinted toward it, her adrenaline pushing her forward. Just as she thought she might escape, one of the men grabbed her arm, yanking her to a stop. Elena struggled, kicking and thrashing, but the man's grip was like iron. Let me go, she screamed, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. The commotion caused the man to hesitate, his grip loosening just enough for Elena to break free. She stumbled away, her vision blurred by fear and exhaustion. A passing cyclist stopped to help, creating a distraction that allowed Elena to slip away into the maze of alleyways. When she finally reached her car, she collapsed into the driver's seat, her body trembling. The USB drive was still in her purse, a lifeline that had nearly cost her everything. But she couldn't stop now. The turning point had come, and Elena was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Elena waited until Victor was home that evening, steeling herself for what she knew would be the most dangerous confrontation of her life. The USB drive Rosa had given her was safely hidden, its damning contents ready to expose Victor and his criminal empire. But first she needed answers, and she needed to face him. Victor was in his study when Elena entered, his back to her as he scrolled through his phone. He didn't turn around when she spoke. We need to talk. His shoulders stiffened, but his voice was calm. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something. No, Elena said firmly. It can't. Victor turned, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. What's this about? Elena stepped closer, her heart pounding. I know, Victor. About the clinic, the money laundering, the cartel. I know everything. For a moment the mask slipped. Victor's expression darkened, a flicker of anger and fear flashing in his eyes. But he quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. You're imagining things, Elena. You've been stressed lately and... Don't lie to me. Elena snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. I've seen the evidence. The offshore accounts, the illegal surgeries. I know about Morales. Victor's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, Elena said, stepping even closer. And so will the authorities when they see what I have. Victor's eyes burned with fury. You've been snooping around? Spying on me? Do you have any idea what you've done? I've uncovered the truth, Elena shot back. The truth you've been hiding from me for years. Victor rose from his chair, towering over her. You've put yourself in danger, Elena. Do you think Morales will just let this go? You've made yourself a target? I made myself a target the moment I married you, she said bitterly. But I'm not afraid anymore. Victor's expression shifted, a cold calculation taking over. You don't understand what you're dealing with. If you hand over that evidence, you won't just destroy me, you'll destroy yourself. Elena met his gaze, unflinching. I'd rather destroy this life than live another day as your pawn. For a moment, they stood in silence, the tension crackling like electricity. Then Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face paling slightly. It's Morales? Elena's stomach twisted. Good. Tell him his empire is about to crumble. Victor didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the phone and stepped away, speaking in hushed tones. Elena couldn't hear what he said, but his body language betrayed his fear. When he hung up, he turned back to her, his face grim. They're coming, he said flatly. You've pushed them too far. Elena's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Morales knows you've been digging, Victor said. He doesn't leave loose ends. Minutes later, the sound of screeching tires outside sent a jolt of fear through Elena. She rushed to the window and saw two black SUVs pull into the driveway. Men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions hard and purposeful. Victor grabbed her arm. "We need to leave. Now." Elena wrenched free. "I'm not running." "You don't have a choice," Victor growled. "If they find you, they'll what?" Elena cut him off. "Do to me what you've been doing to others for years?" Victor's desperation was palpable. "Elena, please. I made mistakes, but I never wanted this. You have to trust me." "Trust you?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "The only mistake I made was trusting you in the first place." Before Victor could respond, the front door burst open. The men entered, their weapons drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. Victor pushed Elena behind him, his hands raised. "Wait," he shouted. "We can talk this out." The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. "You've caused enough trouble, Torres. Morales isn't happy." Elena stepped out from behind Victor, her defiance surprising even herself. "If Morales wants me, he can deal with me directly." The man's eyes narrowed. "You've got guts, lady. But guts won't save you." Victor lunged forward. "Take me instead. Leave her out of this." The man scoffed. "You think Morales cares about your sacrifices? You're both liabilities now." Elena's mind raced. She couldn't let Victor's crimes claim any more lives, including her own. Desperation pushed her to speak. "I have evidence, proof of everything. If you kill us, that evidence will go public. But if you let us walk away, Morales can keep his operation intact." The men hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. The leader glared at her. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Kill us and you'll find out." The room fell into tense silence. Finally, the leader stepped back, motioning for his men to lower their weapons. "This isn't over. Morales doesn't forget." With that, they turned and left, the sound of their retreating footsteps echoing in the house. When the door slammed shut, Elena collapsed against the wall, her body shaking. Victor knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" She looked at him, her eyes blazing. "Don't pretend to care. I saved us tonight, not you." Victor's shoulders sagged, the weight of his actions finally bearing down on him. "What now?" Elena stood, her resolve unshaken. "Now I will end this. I'm taking the evidence to the authorities and I'm taking my life back." Victor didn't argue. For the first time, he seemed to realize that he had lost. As Elena walked away, clutching the USB drive in her hand, she felt a flicker of hope. The collapse of Victor's empire had begun, and with it, the first step toward her freedom. The aftermath of that night was a whirlwind. Elena wasted no time delivering the evidence to the authorities. Daniel Ruiz, the private investigator, accompanied her to ensure the files were handled properly. Together, they walked into the city's anti-corruption unit, a USB drive in hand, its contents powerful enough to bring down Victor's clinic and expose the cartel's influence. Inside the stark government building, Elena recounted her story to a grim-faced investigator. She spoke of the years of betrayal, the shady dealings she had uncovered, and the threats she had faced. Each word solidified her resolve, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was exposing. "This drive contains encrypted files detailing every illegal procedure and financial transaction at Victor Torres's clinic," Daniel explained. "It also links directly to Gabriel Morales and his cartel." The investigator, a grizzled man named Alvarez, nodded solemnly. "This is dangerous territory you're treading, Mrs. Torres. The cartel won't take this lightly." "I don't care," Elena said firmly. "This needs to end." Days later, the fallout began. Law enforcement raided Victor's clinic, seizing documents, computers, and equipment. News of the operation spread quickly, the headlines calling it one of the largest medical corruption scandals in the city's history. Victor's name was plastered across every news outlet, his once pristine reputation now irreparably tarnished. Elena watched the coverage from her living room, a bittersweet mix of relief and sorrow washing over her. The man she had once loved was now a pariah, his empire crumbling under the weight of his crimes. Victor, meanwhile, had been arrested during the raid. Elena visited him in jail, not out of pity but to find closure. When she entered the stark visitation room, Victor looked up, his face weary and hollow. He had aged years in just a few days, his arrogance stripped away. "You came," he said quietly. "I came for answers," Elena replied, sitting across from him. "Why, Victor? Why did you do it?" He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his shoulders sagging. "It started small," A few shortcuts, a little extra money. But then Morales came and it spiraled out of control. You could have stopped, Elena said, her voice cold. You could have chosen differently. Victor's eyes met hers, a flicker of regret in them. I thought I was doing it for us. For our future. Elena shook her head. You weren't doing it for us. You were doing it for yourself. He didn't argue. For the first time, Victor seemed to accept the weight of his choices. As Elena stood to leave, he reached out, his voice desperate. Elena, I'm sorry. She paused, her back to him. So am I. Without another word, she walked away, leaving Victor behind. The fallout wasn't limited to Victor. Gabriel Morales and several members of his cartel had gone underground, evading capture as the authorities dismantled their operations. Elena knew they were still out there, their presence a lingering shadow. But she refused to live in fear. Rosa Martinez, the former clinic employee who had provided the key evidence, was placed under witness protection. Before she disappeared, she thanked Elena for her courage. You didn't just save yourself, Rosa said. You saved so many others. Elena too had to rebuild her life. The house she had shared with Victor was sold, its empty rooms a testament to the life she had left behind. She moved into a small apartment in the city, trading luxury for simplicity and peace. She began volunteering at a women's shelter, using her experience to help others who had faced betrayal and abuse. The work gave her purpose, each day a step toward healing. One evening, Daniel Ruiz visited her, a folder in hand. The investigation is ongoing, he said. But your actions have already made a difference. Elena smiled faintly. It's not just about taking them down. It's about moving forward. Daniel nodded, his respect for her evident. You've got more strength than most people I know. As the months passed, Elena found a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. She no longer defined herself by her marriage or her past. She was her own person now, resilient, independent, and unafraid. On a quiet evening, she sat on her apartment balcony, a cup of tea in hand. The city stretched out before her, its lights twinkling like stars. For the first time in a long time, Elena felt at peace. The fallout of Victor's empire had left scars, but it had also given her the strength to start anew. She had faced betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, but she had survived. And in her survival, she had found herself. The morning sunlight poured through the window of Elena's new apartment, a small but cozy space that she had begun to call home. The fresh scent of brewed coffee filled the air as she sat at her kitchen table, flipping through a journal she had started in the aftermath of her tumultuous journey. Her entries were raw and unfiltered, notes of anger, grief, and confusion. But as the pages progressed, they began to show something else: hope. Each word was a step toward reclaiming her identity, a journey she hadn't realized she needed to take. The headlines about Victor's scandal had faded from the news, replaced by other stories. The world had moved on, but Elena's life was only just beginning. That afternoon, Elena visited the women's shelter where she volunteered. The space was filled with warmth and laughter as women from all walks of life worked together to rebuild what had been broken. Elena had found a new purpose here, helping others find their strength just as she had found her own. A young woman approached her, holding a stack of papers. Elena, do you mind looking over this grant application? I'm not sure I got the wording right. Of course, Elena said, taking the papers with a smile. As she read through the document, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was where she was meant to be, not as someone's wife or a shadow of her former self, but as a woman who had faced darkness and come out stronger. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Elena found herself walking along the river. The city's lights shimmered on the water, a reminder of its constant movement, its endless capacity for change. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Daniel Ruiz checking in as he often did. Just wanted to let you know, he said, Morales' network is officially in shambles. The authorities are still hunting him, but his power is gone. Thank you for telling me, Elena replied, her voice calm. It's good to know. You did more than most people would have, Daniel said. You should be proud of that. Elena ended the call, slipping her phone back into her pocket. She wasn't looking for validation anymore. She had made peace with her choices, knowing they were her own. Back at her apartment, Elena sat on the balcony with a notebook in hand. The journal was no longer just a space for reflection. It had become a place for dreaming. Her pen moved across the page as she outlined ideas for a memoir, a story not just about her survival, but about the resilience of the human spirit. Her thoughts drifted to Rosa, Daniel, and the women at the shelter. Each of them had played a part in her journey, showing her the strength that could come from vulnerability and the courage it took to rebuild. She hoped her story would inspire others to find their own strength, no matter how dire their circumstances. As the night deepened, Elena closed her notebook and gazed out at the city one last time. She had lost so much, but in losing she had found herself. The woman who had once hidden beneath the bed, terrified and unsure, was gone. In her place stood someone unbreakable. She whispered softly into the night, "Here's to a new beginning." And with that, Elena turned out the lights, ready to embrace the future. Elena faced betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, yet she emerged stronger and more resilient. What do you think about her choices? Would you have done anything differently in her situation? If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of resilience and transformation. Your thoughts mean the world to us, so share your perspective in the comments below.